Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Policy Committee of the Athens in Motion Commission. This is our meeting, and I'm going to pull up the screen so we can look at our agenda. Welcome, welcome. Yes, I will share Chrome. All right. It's Wednesday, March 17th. Today we're going to go back to the Complete Streets policy rewrite, and hopefully we'll be able to start talking about our next efforts, and we'll plan for our next meeting. And Erin is taking minutes for us, and we'll have our other minutes at a meeting in the future to approve. But can I get a vote to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
All right, I will second you, Teresa. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. This is our agenda. Okay, Complete Streets policy update. Switching over to the next screen. So, Teresa, I know you spent a lot of time last night going through, cleaning up, checking tense on words, grammar, providing some better wording for us. And so I just went ahead and I accepted all those changes because it seemed great to me. And I thank you for taking the time to do that. And then I took everything that we had and I put it in a new document. So this now says March 17th. And the reason I've done that is because we are at the phase where people who are outside Athens in Motion are willing to take a look and assist us. And so I've heard back from the Diversity Inclusion Office from Crystal. She is working with us to do a phone call the first full week of April. And Daniel, you'll be there?
Yes.
So we greatly appreciate Crystal's time. What I was thinking, she has said that we can send her the document and relevant materials. So I was wondering what y'all thought, because I think that I'll send her this, but I don't want to, this is a pretty meaty document and I want to be mindful of her and her office's time. So I thought that I would emphasize the equity section because this is new, and what the main thing we're looking for is to align our language in terms of equity with Athens-Clarke County United Government. We have some good phrasing here, but we want that to be in line and see if anything else stands out to her. And there's some other references to this in the document, but mainly I think this section and that trying to have that phrasing be aligned with ACC and also be as specific and as clear as possible is what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Lauren, the whole document, yes?
Say that again?
You're going to send her the entire document, but just tell her that Section 3 equity is where we really need her expertise.
Yes. And I would like her to have the whole document just for context, but I will, just want to emphasize that section.
Right. That's good. I think she should have the whole document.
And when were you saying we could meet with her, or you're going to meet with her?
She has said she has time the week of April 5th.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
yeah, and I guess if anyone else wants to be on the call, that's okay. Daniel, does that count as a meeting, or how does that work?
No, I would just set up a WebEx. It doesn't have to be. If y'all wanted to do a break, like a policy meeting, we could do that. Stephen, what do you think?
Yeah.
Well, if you're actually changing the document based on her comments, I think that should be done during a meeting. But if you're just getting feedback that then you would incorporate into like a conversation at our next official policy meeting, then that'd be fine. So it'd be the same thing as like sending out notes for staff that their response doesn't have to be part of the official meeting, but you explaining how that's going to fit into the document would.
Okay, so it would be appropriate for Daniel and I to do a call with her and then bring that feedback to the rest of the policy committee at the meeting, that whatever meeting follows that.
Works for
That would
me.
be my recommendation.
Okay. Is everyone
One-
okay
one-
with us doing that?
Yes,
Go ahead,
definitely.
Daniel.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
I'm sorry.
One more comment on the equity piece. I have been talking to Crystal kind of at a more holistic level of TPW and equity. And I hate to be talking about Complete Streets 2.0 when we're working on the first version, but when we do come back around and update this policy next time around, I am very hopeful that we will have an overall kind of equity toolkit for TPW projects that we can allude to in the next iteration of this policy, so that it can say every Athens in Motion project or every Complete Streets project will refer back to the equity toolkit that TPW uses for capital project improvements. So it doesn't exist yet, but it's something that we've been talking about for a while and hope to have kind of ironed out over the next year.
Okay, so this equity toolkit is something y'all are working on in TPW.
Right, but it would apply to pretty much any of our capital projects where we can say, here are the questions of equity that we want to put a magnifying lens on anytime we're proposing a capital project.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and yeah, I look forward to the second phase when we can incorporate that. That sounds great. I would be excited to put that into play. Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that.
Me too.
All right, that's all I have for our complete streets policy at this point. Were there any additional comments, thoughts?
After going over it with maybe not a fine tooth comb, but with a comb, I thought that it read pretty well, and I think it's in good shape. So, once we get some more people to add some comments in and make suggestions, then I think we'll have a good policy we can be proud of.
Agreed. I'm just going to put some notes here. Shares. Great. Moving on from complete streets. Wow. This is the first meeting we've had where that hasn't been our focus in a while. So
I have one thing. Sorry to add at the end. Just I think I had forwarded you and Daniel and again, I know Baltimore is a larger city and maybe has more resources than Athens does, but and again, this might be for something further on down the line to maybe add to the Athens in Motion page is that Baltimore, when they pass their complete streets policy, and then they have like this kind of a manual, which is sort of, I think they're kind of like Athens in Motion in terms of like bike ped plan, obviously includes more transit because they have rail. Just the idea of making sure that within, and this is maybe a more public facing thing, is that folks through maybe Athens in Motion understand what complete streets is and sort of what the policy is and how they interplay. And so the reason I'd sort of sent that to y'all was specifically to kind of mention in this meeting as just I felt like Baltimore's done a really good job of kind of like being forward thinking about their policy and about that manual, but also in terms of like doing that kind of in-person community engagement, but also I think kind of like communicating it from a very high level. So the mayor, I mean, just to be frank, Bike More, which is the equivalent of Bike Athens in Baltimore, they are a 501c3, but they have a C4, and so they actually did a lot of campaign work to get the new mayor elected in Baltimore, and so the mayor has been very on the front foot on these issues, and so obviously, that's not what's happened here in Athens. Bike Athens is a C3. I'm a C3. We're all C3s. But just seeing kind of the degree to which the mayor has taken this issue and sort of put it, it's not just the Athens-Clarke County government. It's not just the Baltimore city government. It's like, this is a message from the mayor. Like, this is a message from someone that was an elected official. And so I think I like the way that's presented. I know that may not work here, but just to kind of keep that in mind as we think about, like, if this is adopted and moving forward, how to kind of integrate the new policy with Athens in Motion. And again, having it be something that a lot of folks understand is not just something that's to the side, but something that's sort of central to how transportation operates and sort of what the goals are relative to like our comprehensive plan and things like why am I forgetting it? Envision Athens and all the that it does connect to all these sort of bigger things that are happening, versus sometimes people will say, oh, I hear about this like bike lane going in and that's this sort of like side thing. It's like, no, this is central to what our transportation planning process has been. So I'll leave it at that.
Can I add on to that? Daniel, one thing we had asked Hillary about, and she just wasn't able to get to it because there was so much going on, was giving Athens in Motion, if not a website, maybe a some place in the TPW web page, neighborhood, whatever you call it, and we could include, what the Complete Streets policy and our public engagement process and all those things kind of in one place, and then if we develop our little sidewalks for interiors toolkit for neighborhoods, then we could also have things like that.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I've actually. Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
No, yeah, Daniel, where's our website?
Yeah, Daniel, where's the website?
So I have on my to-do list and I'm creating a webpage outline for a new Athens in Motion or just actually bike pedestrian web page within the transportation public works site, and then within that we can have the AIM Commission as well, and you guys would have a website and you could send content and we could do those types of edits. So and within them we can then host plan and any web apps and stuff like that. So,
Super. Thank you.
yeah.
That'll be great. Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, going back to so Elliot, this the Baltimore document, it's a manual, but it's like a cross between Complete Streets policy and like our Athens in Motion plan, right? And I
Yeah,
can't.
it is. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's a little bit kind of like GDOT's Complete Streets policy is actual within their design policy manual. And so my sense is the higher up you get in terms of government level or broader of scope, is the more that these Complete Streets policies will focus at that kind of like policy manual level, versus like very few states have policies passed at the state legislature that mandate or like demand more or less complete streets. Once you get to the state DOT level, it becomes more, or like MP, a lot of the metropolitan planning organizations will have more, it's almost like a mix between like the NACDO guide and, like a policy. And then when you drill down to the lower and lower levels, they look more like ours. So yeah, so this feels a little bit almost more like a state DOT level kind of policy because it includes a lot of the design elements. And so it is both a planning and an engineering document in a way. So yeah, it makes sense to me from what I know about the way a lot of city DOTs, like the biggest 50 cities, kind of see themselves as almost like smaller versions of a state DOT versus, thankful to have our TPW here, but our TPW is also doing public works, doing stormwater. It's a little bit of a different dynamic in terms of where they fall within the government kind of process. I mean, a lot of the same things, but like we have a separate planning department versus, again, like some of these DOTs have transportation planning built into their DOT. So it's, sometimes the scope is different because like Atlanta DOT that they just formed last year, Atlanta DOT brought in folks from City of Atlanta Department of Planning and things like that. So when you get to the city DOT level, sometimes they emulate more a little bit what a state DOT does, and kind of their resources are more like that as well at times.
I kind of like the way we have it here. It seems like it's more flexible, and there's greater opportunity for communication between entities.
Yeah, I'm wondering if future version of the policy or update would include not just our complete streets policy, which by then would refer to the equity toolkit, but may also have something like a letter from the mayor. It has some teeth and some chewable bits.
Yeah, it would be
like
nice.
things that people public can digest.
Yeah, would be nice to have the mayor's welcome attached to the front of it.
Yeah.
I will say another part of a lot of that difference between, like, again, sort of like a DOT at a state, like at a city level, is that they are often also including like TDM projects. So like they are eligible, like, so transportation demand management, like they have parts of their departments that are actively trying to get people to stop using cars to get from work to home. Now, what that means in 2021, I don't follow TDM enough to know, but I think certainly Athens and UGA have their programs around those things potentially, but it's not the same thing relative to, like, we have transit, but we don't have like mass transit, like rail. So that's also time, again, I sort of said that earlier, but I think sometimes some of the complete streets documents and transportation planning documents have a lot of that stuff built in that just isn't as relevant here, but again, could be in, we may have rail to Atlanta in 30 years. So who knows? That's a long in the distant thing.
Yeah. Well, there is that, we do have that component of our work as Athens in Motion commissioners to encourage people to try other modes of transportation. That is within our realm, but I mean, I know we're not paid staff. We're volunteers trying to work with staff who have a lot of other priorities to make that happen. And some of that has gotten derailed by COVID, like our Open Streets event. Yeah, well, just gives us more time to put it together, Teresa.
Yeah, we're going to have another meeting. Melanie just sent out an invitation, so I forget what the date is, but
Okay.
But the planning is happening, so we'll be ready to go once the restrictions are lifted.
Yeah. Okay. Elliot, as always, thank you for sending us this kind of stuff and for your perspective and your understanding of context with these documents. It's greatly appreciated. Next item, our next efforts. We have two other items on our work plan, which I did send to the mayor, and he did acknowledge the receipt of our work plan. So considerations for small sidewalks and intersections, these are on our list. And then determining tier 1 projects. There's two parts to this. There's our next round of tier 1 projects. And then there's also the funding opportunity of T-SPLOST. So these are kind of two separate things that have some overlap. Daniel, would you like to share your thoughts about that? And Stephen?
Stephen, you can go ahead.
Yeah, which would you like to talk about first?
Yeah, let's talk. So when I've been thinking about like Athens in Motion, it has been solely through the funding lens, through the funding source of T-SPLOST, right? So in my mind, it's been that, okay, next tier 1 projects, they're going to come from T-SPLOST. And so we need to have a proposal to submit to the T-SPLOST Citizens Advisory Committee. That will be our next round of potential tier 1 projects. But these things don't have to be married together, right?
Yeah, so I'd actually see two proposals. One is the continuation of the plan through the tiers, right? So you would, and maybe the policy committee's role in that would be how to present that to overall AIM Commission to start talking about those different tier 1 projects and how to prioritize those. I feel like it's such a really big issue to go over that you'd really want input from the entire commission as you talk through it. And Daniel would at that point be able to kind of help guidance on those as well. To be honest, to kind of the history on, we had a tier 1 projects and staff really worked on, and this was back when Drew Raisler was here, on picking 5 bike projects and 5 ped projects and why those fit into why those would be the first 5 to be done. And it seemed a lot, it was more qualitative than quantitative, I think, that picked, because each of the tier 1 projects really has the same, they didn't look at individual scores. They just said, you're all equal in if you're a tier 1 project, you're equal to each other. And Drew and other folks picked out why some of those made sense to move faster than others. I think, we have an opportunity to take more of a technical approach this time around and pick, kind of choose a dollar amount to go for and then try and pick some more projects to fit into that dollar amount. That's the first T-SPLOST request. And the second one, I think, is going back to that small and local sidewalks fund, which doesn't exist right now. But just going back to the idea that we know that AIM will never really touch on residential roadways or neighborhood areas without sidewalks because it's focused so much on the larger roadways. And because of that, we should at least consider asking for a second amount of money to help those projects along if we feel like that's a priority. Daniel, I don't know if you've had a chance to think about how to prioritize the next round of funded tier 1 projects, or if you have any guidance you'd want to send to the group. But my thought was the policy committee can kind of start thinking about how they present that to the overall AIM Commission.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to split out the bike and ped similar to what we did this last time as one proposal. And once I get a better picture of kind of what is tier 1 and where's tier 1 overlapping, where both items are on tier 1 and one's tier 1, one's tier 2. I'm kind of curious, we've talked a little bit in the last couple of weeks about some of the safety concerns that have popped up in terms of, if there's a sidewalk that's heaving and it's cracked open, or it's not accessible anymore, or even if it's just outdated, where can we get funding to address those types of problems? I don't know that T-Splosh might be the source for that, which I would say that probably would put it into a third proposal, but I know you probably don't want to overload all of the T-Splosh up with a bunch of different routes.
Well, maintenance and repair, we try and cover out of operating budget, out of streets and drainage operating budget. If we get to the point where they're overwhelmed with what they can do with existing dollars in their operating budget, then I think you're right that we need to put a proposal. But that's part of like our annual operating proposals. So we could gather some data that say like, here's what we're able to fix right now. Here's what we'd like to be able to fix, and the data we're capturing and how much that might cost. So I think that's more of an operating ask that we can certainly, come October of this year, we can have that together. We don't have to wait for T-Splosh for that portion.
Okay, and then the only other thought would be if we start exploring the possibility of urban trails, which I don't know if we'll be there by the time T-Splosh comes around, but I know, we've got a lot of multi-use paths coming up, and how can we connect those multi-use paths, not just within right-of-way, but connecting it to other trail systems. And so those wouldn't necessarily be within the Athens in Motion unless we edited the plan to include those routes. So that would be my only other idea.
Okay, then so we could be talking about putting forth for T-Splosh up to 3 requests for 3 buckets of funding. PED tier 1 that we've selected, our candidate projects will say, like these are the ones we would like to fund with T-Splosh. Bike, and then possibly these urban trail connectors that would bridge the two. And then we want to get a budget line item for small sidewalks separate from T-Splosh.
Yeah, and I think and I understand when Laura and I sat on the T-Splosh sort of citizens committee, I think we heard a lot about sort of like, okay, well, what is this? We had a lot of debate in terms of like, what is a special project? How is that defined, right? Like, do we use this funding for projects that would normally come out of kind of operating costs, or should be, in operating costs? So Aaron as well. My apologies. Aaron was also on that committee. And I sort of wonder if part of the framing is sort of like, if it's, how to say this, like, if the actual project that you're doing, let's say again, working with Georgia Power to remove an old power pole to make a sidewalk accessible, if that's just a one-off event and that just falls under maintenance and etc. But if TPW or Athens in Motion or both create a program called like the Great Sidewalk Fix of 2021, or what you can call it, whatever you want, right? If it becomes a program in of itself, and it's something that hasn't been done before, I mean, I think you can. A lot of this is, I hate to say it, it's like marketing. It's framing. And
Yeah.
I think about like People for Bikes has their program, the Big Leap or the Big Jump. I forget. It's like choose 10 cities, and instead of one-off doing a lot of bike projects, you do a bunch of them at once. So what normally would be a normal bike lane project, right, gets to be like bumped up because now it's grouped together with a bunch of other projects in a city, and People for Bikes funds all those projects at once. I think it's called the Big Jump. And so in my mind, it's sort of like you could almost create in our own sense within T-Splosh, our own sort of big jump relative to sidewalk, making, a sidewalk repair. And that in itself becomes its own special project that's separate from the PED bucket, because the PED bucket's really about building our sidewalk connected network, right? So I think there's a framing thing that comes up there that we could maybe use.
Yeah, that's a good point, Elliot. And kind of going back to a previous conversation about ADA accessibility too, I kind of saw those as 2 different things between repairing what used to work back to its original state versus improving stuff that was never really built up to a true standard. You're right. Maybe in whether it's, I like your kind of marketing idea, but what we really could say is sidewalk repairs really could be done with operating funds, but we could have a bucket called ADA accessibility or something flashier than that. It doesn't have to just do with sidewalks, but it could be buildings and facilities, ramps, parking, sidewalks, etc. That is putting the county more in compliance with Title IX, Title VI, and our ADA accessibility.
And
I
if
don't
we
know if
could
that's
wrap
something
in like data collection with that as well, because that's one really important element is, how do you find out where the accessibility gaps are if you're not like reaching out? I think this is where one of my conversations with Crystal, and her name is skipping me now, but her new partner over there.
Salah?
Yes, thank you. She had mentioned the possibility of not just assuming that we know what accessibility issues they might be having, but reaching out and creating a way to get into that community and find out what their actual kind of barriers are and trying to address that. So we could wrap that in somehow to the project proposal when we get to that point.
I've had multiple conversations with Eve Anthony from the Community Council on Aging about absolutely like all the things we've talked about, just because so many of the folks they work with use mobility devices, are in wheelchairs or other kinds of devices. So I know they're definitely one community partner that's been interested in this issue for a long time, but I don't think has necessarily been pulled into this kind of framework.
Yeah, maybe it's something called infrastructure equity, but it doesn't necessarily have to be put forward by Athens in Motion. Maybe it is something that's brought forward by Eve and her team or another coalition. But I think that's an excellent pursuit for a bucket of funding.
So just to make sure I got this right for the minutes, the PED, the bike, and the urban trails that we just discussed, would those all be separate sources of funding coming for those, or just separate projects that we could draw funding from different sources on?
They would be separate submissions to T-Splost.
Okay, thanks.
And Stephen, did you have any thoughts on the idea of the urban trails? I know I just kind of threw that at you, but.
No, I haven't had a lot of time to think on that one yet. I'm not against it. I want to, look back and see if it would be separate from the Athens in Motion master plan, or if it could be tied in with it. Any trail network off the right of way, we'd have to think about how that fits in.
And Daniel, just in case some folks are watching or end up watching this later, can you explain what an urban trail is versus other trails?
Yeah, so in my previous position in leisure services, we did an overhaul on the Greenway Network plan this past year and created a new designation for urban trails as one of the trail networks here in Athens. So we have the Greenway Trail System, we have the Firefly Trail network, which is just the trail itself. Athens Line is a future proposed trail. So we have all these different trails and partner networks now with Athens in Motion. We considered them a partner network so that all of the trails could kind of connect to each other. So because the user isn't looking at, oh, I'm going to ride this bike lane from point A to point B. And like, that's not the only destination. Like there's multiple destinations, and those improvements along the way are just parts of that route. And so how can you get the whole system connected together with these different urban trail connections? So some of them might connect to a greenway or to the Firefly. Other ones might, I think one of the more memorable ones or notable ones is the Normaltown connector, which was a proposed trail originally part of the Greenway network in 2016 that connected from the Middle Oconee Greenway to the North Oconee Greenway. Keep in mind, the Middle Oconee Greenway doesn't exist yet, but the future connection there. And so we designated that as an urban trail since it primarily went through the urban fabric and would most likely have to go along the right of way in a lot of locations, with several cut throughs that went outside of the right of way. And so the idea there is that we overlaid the Athens in Motion network with the sections that were not within the Athens in Motion network, and we called the other sections urban trails. So there would need to be more study in terms of like how that fits into our network, and I think over the next few years we'll be able to work that in. I don't know that it'll become part of the Athens in Motion network though. So it is currently part of the Greenway network, and this goes to a discussion me and Stephen have had before, just with in terms of priority. There's high priority in terms of desirability, but then there's funding strategies. And so should the Greenway Commission, which is primarily all about conservation, should they be prioritizing these urban trail connections that are really valuable for transportation functions, but might not have ecological value? And their decision with that typically comes back with, we want to stick to the river corridors. So it leaves this gap of trails and connections that are high priority, but no one will fund because, well, that's part of the Greenway network. You know, we're not going to propose that. So it's probably more detail, but that's generally how that could, I don't know exactly how it fits in to our process yet, but it's on the Greenway network as a partner, as a urban trail network, and then we could potentially seek funding for it, but then maintenance and the ongoing operations is a whole other conversation that hasn't happened either. So does that cover?
Well, the ability, I've seen other places where they've used curb separated protected type bike lanes to kind of do some connecting work between pieces of trail, etc. And so really what you're doing is creating that sort of seamless protected connection. And so you know, sometimes they would they've used, I've seen different names, right? But like it's a similar idea in that knowing that I mean, obviously a lot of people use greenways and trails and all that, but that a lot of times that is going to be your entry level point for a user who maybe isn't as experienced as riding in traffic, et cetera. And so to connect, to really get value added relative to those two pieces of connected infrastructure, to have that connection be, I mean, to be honest, it's the point I've tried to make with people about like two-way cycle tracks, which is basically if they're curb protected, they're basically a multi-use trail. They just don't, they operate within the curb to curb. People maybe aren't buying that quite yet, but eventually folks will get there, I think. So I think that to me is like a big opportunity relative to that, the concept, right? Is like if curb protected or some kind of protected bike lane is a possibility to connect those pieces of trail, you can almost, or at least one piece of trail to say, like, you know, the old Jefferson Road, which is more or less like a low traffic bikeway, you know, something like that. It's like that's really the kind of infrastructure that you could talk about as sort of an urban trail connectivity.
Mhm.
Elliot, can I ask you about this? Because this has actually come up, those two-way on-road cycle, like bike paths. This came up as one of the options suggested with the Prince Avenue locally owned side.
Right.
And so then does the data show that people who are, you know, they're people who would cycle, but they will only do like multi-use paths. Are they more comforted by a bike track that has both bikeways on it versus the bike lanes on either side of the street? Are they more likely to transition to the track that you mentioned? Any?
I think the data generally shows that people want protected, and that
Okay.
the context of that and generally like curb protected or planter protected or something that's like a hard surface, not just a bollard,
Mhm.
and not just buffered, right? If that's possible. I think whether you do two-way or one-way is so dependent on context, and that's where like something like Prince with all the drive-through cuts and all that, and a lot of intersections with some of those weird diagonal streets. I think having two-way on Prince, and I watched a little bit of that, but I didn't watch all of it. Having two-way on Prince, like it almost makes sense on one side of the road, but not the other. Like it makes sense on the what you might call the north side of the road, like going by the president's mansion, all that, because the gaps between the driveways are pretty big. But on the south side, it definitely it all doesn't seem to make any sense. So in that way, but in that way, I would say that's probably not the best location for a two-way cycle track versus like either incredibly dense locations in a downtown area, but where there's not a lot of like there's not a lot of drive-throughs. I mean that doesn't exist as much in Athens, but certainly in other cities it does. I'm trying to think of other locations that might work in Athens. Honestly, two-way cycle tracks on some of the bigger roads that we're looking at would make more sense. But again, that they start the more you move them away from the travel lane for cars, is the more it just becomes like an urban trail. It becomes more like a separated facility that way. You wouldn't want just bollards on something like Lexington. You'd actually want to move it like off the roadway per se. So it's I would say the difference between a one-way protected and a two-way sort of cycle track protected is so much about roadway context. And I think someone like Ernie Bauman and the experts at Tool, like they could kind of walk the county through that, I think. And then maybe they did a little bit in Athens in Motion, but I think the more seriously you start thinking about those differences, I think someone like Ernie could really, and Jared could probably walk us through a lot of that. Like what context does it make sense to do the two-way cycle track? Because I think it does in some places in Athens, to be honest. And I think there may be opportunities with some of these connectors we're talking about.
Oh, yeah, thanks for that context. I mean, isn't the issue that we have across America that most of our streets are stroads, that they're like the hybrids and they pretty much all have just too many driveways and they're trying to be too many things to too many people instead of prioritizing the most vulnerable user?
Yeah, but I think there are, there are some, I think there are places that have done two-way cycle tracks on, even on more like residential streets where, again, where you're trying to connect maybe a greenway to like a school or to a population center to like a business center. Two-way cycle tracks are, because they can be done in the right of way, they don't have to be moved onto the side like a multi-use path that you might want to put along Lexington. Like nobody, Sharon Dickerson once said to me, like, you can't actually think anyone would ride in a bike lane on Lexington. It's like, well, no, that's not what we're saying. We're saying is people ride in the sidewalk, which shows that people do need to get on that up and down that corridor by bike or by walking, obviously. But yeah, so that's the problem is the roads like, Atlanta Highway or Lexington are always going to have those problems with the driveways. But I still think you can do two-way cycle tracks on locations where there are bigger gaps between maybe commercial businesses, and I think there are places in Athens where that could work.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right, so for our last couple minutes, I want to just pull this up, our little agenda again. Oops, come here. Not that. Have WebEx in the way. There we go. So as we're thinking about what we want to work on next, we've had some good conversations. I want to talk about like some possible deadlines, which I think will help us make a decision, like where we want to focus our efforts. TSPOS, that committee will be forming later this year, and the project deadline will be before the end of the year. I think that will be like December is when is what I remember. Aaron might have a better memory than I do. I feel like projects were due in November, December.
Yeah, and then I think December was our first meeting, and then by January it really kicked off with discussion and then voting later. I thought, what, March, April, May,
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
So we will want to, as an entire commission, like have our package of projects, or whether that's 2 buckets or 3 buckets, ready to go in just a few months' time. And we know that our meetings are full of lots of stuff. We don't even get a chance to really nerd out the way we want to about transportation stuff. So we should keep that in mind. The considerations for small sidewalks, if we want to get a budget line item, I'm thinking we're also going to need to have this together by the end of the year so we can request that. When are staff's budget requests due? Isn't it? They've already submitted them like in February, right?
Right. So if we're looking at, if we want to do that as a kind of a general capital request, it would be due November or end of October this year, and that would be for FY23. Or
Wow.
it could be its own T-SPLOST line if you'd want it. Really, I guess my hesitant. We kind of need to know the scale, right? So that's really scope. That's what I'm hoping to get some help from you all, is figuring out where is the priority for these small sidewalks. Is it and what kind of program are we really talking about? And that scope kind of leads us to the budget, which leads us to, okay, well, which type of fund are we searching for then? Is it a couple $100,000 through the general capital, or is it a $1 million project plus that needs to come through the next T-SPLOST?
Okay. Right. All right. So we need to develop a program and then go from there. Or
Yep.
Yes, a scope for a program. So yeah, that deadline is even more looming. And then intersections, kind of evergreen, but good to have. And we said we would work on it this year.
And we've got that priority list, right? That y'all the TPW came up with, like, and that's a priority list without a funded mandate or funded bucket, right?
That's right. And maybe if you can clarify here. So the bucket that we've got now, which is actually old SPLOST 2011 money, is focused on our kind of most dangerous intersections in Athens, going down by the matrix that we used for that. The work plan intersections here, I thought, was more of a policy on how we include active transportation into new intersection development, like planning for not just how every intersection improvement affects vehicular traffic, but how you can build for bike and ped, even if that part of the network doesn't exist there yet. Is that a right understanding, or is that something, am I off?
That was my understanding.
Got it. I mean, it's certainly relevant to Prince and Pulaski when the conversation we talked about with during the meeting last week, and I know Steve has his concerns that so yeah, I think that's certainly relevant to a lot of the conversations that are happening right now.
And likewise with the intersection of Atlanta Highway, Mitchell Bridge, Timothy Road. I mean, that's a mess.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm glad it's getting some attention.
Okay. It is March 17th. Let's go ahead and put our next meeting on the calendar. I just kind of want to look at that. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Oops.
And Lauren, I was just going to mention while we're getting ready for that, just to remind everyone that we've got the Lexington Highway and Atlanta Highway public input open right now. I just forwarded the message to you that has dates and locations. I don't know if you want to post that up on the screen, but for anyone watching, and Teresa, you could probably give some more context for that. Oh, you're muted, Teresa.
I'm sorry. I put a spreadsheet in the Dropbox that lists the dates, times, places, and then, has a couple of slots for us to put our names in, So it would be great if we could get some Athens in Motion folks to show up at each of these, for our own education and also because, we can be helpful to people.
Yeah, I have Teresa's email with the upcoming Atlanta Highway events.
Okay, just sent it.
Okay, sorry. Oh, there it is.
Oh, it should include all the Atlanta Highway and Lexington corridor events because they got some at Ben Epps Airport, and some other place on the east side.
And they're all really both and. They'll have information for both corridors at each of the pop-ups.
Good.
Okay, yeah, I will actually share my screen. That. Okay. And it looks like Keith did attach a flyer, but this is just for Lexington Way. Oh no, it's both.
It's for both.
Yeah, there's one for each.
Yes. Okay. So these here are the opportunities. Stop in. These are great opportunities. Monday, March 27th, 22nd, 6 to 8 at the NEPS. Wednesday, March 24th, 6 to 8 at the Extension office. That's in Bogart. Thursday, March 25th from 6 to 8, also at the Extension office. Saturday, March 27th, 10 a.m. to noon. So a good variety of like after work events and then something on Saturday as well. Great. This is a nice flyer. Ooh, and some QR codes. Ever since my phone just automatically started interpreting QR codes, I like them. Now that you don't have to have like an app for it.
Yeah.
Stuff.
I didn't see it on that one, but they'll also be, I think they're at Kofer's this Saturday. So if you want to get some plants and check out like that stuff.
I'm going to be there. I've got a big shopping list.
For that one.
There you go.
Actually, volunteering with Books for Keith this Saturday.
Ooh.
Yeah, so okay.
They're doing a big book
Yep.
shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So in turn, our next meetings, do we want to continue to meet twice a month? We do have a lot to do.
Well, we were meeting twice a month because we had to get that complete streets thing done.
Right.
So I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe we could go back to once a month unless there's some pressing issue.
I'm kind of leaning. I've got, well, with staff, probably once a month and then with the general meeting, but
yeah,
I'm leaning towards.
Okay, well, because we don't know when our phone call is going to take place with Crystal the week of April 5th, then maybe we can plan for the following week, Wednesday, April 14th. Would that work?
Yeah.
Okay. So policy. Yeah. I'm going to say that our top priority, beyond wrapping up the complete streets document, let's go ahead and plan to move forward with determining what we're going to submit for T-SPLOST, because we're just going to need so much time to look into that and to work with staff and to present to the rest of the commission, because they're gonna want time to look at that. So I think we should those should be our two things: wrapping up that complete streets policy and then trying to move forward with selecting our next round of tier 1 projects. Does that sound good for everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. Stephen and Daniel, what would be the best thing for us to do? I mean, we can look at the tier 1 projects. Should we come forth with some ideas to share, some places where we think the connectivity would be most useful? I mean, because I think once we're ready to present to the rest of the Athens in Motion Commission, I'd love to, I mean, I know this is a little preemptive, but I'd love to traverse these areas where we're talking about asking for money for sidewalks and bike lanes. Not exactly a walk audit because we're not there yet, but a pre-walk audit, I guess.
Well,
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to have, you know, to be thinking about what the criteria is that you'd want to look, that you'd want to, you know, kind of score these by, because they're, you know, they are inside of, all of them are tier 1. We can look at individual scores, but that really wasn't the goal of, you know, of the scoring system. It was just to put them into kind of a, here's one big pot of projects, now go at it. I think that it didn't really go much farther than that once it was tiered into 1, 2, and 3. So the criteria that you'd want to separate them out by, and or if you have really specific justification for specific corridors, that's perfectly fine too. It's just coming, you know, like you said, reading back through tier 1 and picking out either specific projects or how you'd like, what lens you'd like to use to start prioritizing them.
Okay. Yeah. There's a lot of angles we could take at this. We could, you know, we saw that Riverbend Road ended up being, you know, just a very expensive project. It was supposed to be on the high side, 1 million, but I mean, these are just estimates, and it didn't take into account all the retaining walls and that we were going to need. So we could, you know, one approach could be, you know, what's the low hanging fruit? Where will we get the most bang for our buck? Also keeping in mind that these prices are, you know, may not reflect what things will actually cost. So we could take that approach. We could decide couple of big high impact projects. So yeah. So
I think connectivity should be our number one consideration. Like, you know, we should pick projects that are going to connect with things that are already there, that are already planned, so that, you know, we're creating a thing that actually works. And
Yep.
you know, that's my take on it.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'd like to, by then I should have all the access I need to the data, so we could do what we in leisure services used to call map time, where I'll do a shared screen and we can look through the data and see it right there and talk about the lines and see the network. So
Yep, good. I like that.
That'll be fun.
yeah, and maps make a lot more sense to me than spreadsheets. So
Definitely.
sorry, Stephen.
Aw. I like spreadsheets too, whatever. I'll take it.
I
I'll
also
take
like
anything.
spreadsheets.
Yeah. All right. I know we're over time and I apologize for that. I just want to be clear on, you know, where we're going next because we have a lot we can do. And so our next meeting day is Wednesday at 5 p.m. on WebEx. And we will talk more about the Complete Streets policy. We'll have some suggested feedback from Crystal's office. And we will begin to move forward with criteria for selecting the next round of tier 1 projects and being strategic about them as T-SPLOS projects.
Right.
Great. Well, everyone, thank you for your attendance. Erin, thank you for taking minutes for us. Greatly appreciate that. And
Thank you for being a good chairwoman.
I am furniture. Yeah, and I will see y'all in a couple days. I will get the agenda together for our big meeting next Tuesday. Yeah.
Good night.
Looking forward to it.
Have a good night.
See y'all.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.